Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. So lately I have been going back to some older techniques. I will leave some of those videos linked down below, but today I am doing that again with some masking tape backgrounds. These are super easy backgrounds to create. All you need are some ink pads. I'm using dye ink pads today, but pigment ink pads will work as well. You just want to make sure they're nice and juicy. So I'm using the Catherine Pooler ink pads. I like these because they're foam, they're really juicy, and I can really push down into them to get some color onto my masking tape. You also need some cardstock. I'm using plain white 110-pound cardstock, and you need some tape. Masking tape, I'm using painter's tape, just a low tack tape that is going to have a little stick, but you don't want it so sticky that when you stick it to the paper, it's not going to come back up. Now I want to measure out my masking tape or my painter's tape here to be long enough to cover how I want to stamp this onto my cardstock. So I'm going at an angle here, so I want to make sure it's a little bit longer so I can get it from corner to corner. Now, with your masking tape, you want to go with the sticky side facing the ink pad. I was thinking that it was sticky side up, but sticky side down towards the ink pad, and you're going to ink up the sticky side of the masking tape. Now, I like to do this over a piece of computer paper to grab all that extra ink, and the first time you're inking this up, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome. So grab your cardstock and move it out of the way. You don't want to do any smearing or accidental drops on it. So just move it out of the way and ink up your masking tape off to the side. Now this is longer than my ink pad, so what I like to do is just ink it up from side to side, lay it down into the ink pad, and then just move it down as I need to ink up more of it. You want to make sure also whenever you're getting your masking tape that it is long enough for not only to stretch across however long you want your cardstock to be. If you're going from corner to corner, you want your tape to go to corner, but you also need somewhere to hold with your fingers. So make sure you have that area for your fingers. A little bit extra is going to be great for that. So once you have that completely inked up, go ahead and lay it onto your cardstock. I like to look through, and you're going to be able to tell if you have inked up enough of your masking tape. You're going to be able to see the ink on the other side. I felt like I needed a little bit more, so I brought it back over to my ink pad, and I'll just put the edges right back into there and press down with my finger to pick up that ink in the spots where I felt I needed a little bit more. Then I'll lay it across my cardstock and literally tape it down to the cardstock. Just press down. Now, I don't like to use my fingers at this point because I have been using them to push the ink or push the tape into my ink pad. I feel like I always have a little bit of leftover ink on them. So I like to take a piece of extra paper, place it over the top of that tape, and rub that way. Now, if you feel like you're not getting enough coverage with your fingers, go ahead and take a brayer and press on it that way. You could also use an acrylic block, just something to get nice even pressure. Once you feel like it's pressed down, go ahead and peel up the tape from your background. It's going to release super easily, and there you've got that great line going across. Now, this is a very distressed look. It is so much fun and super easy. Now, that is the basic technique, just pressing the tape into the ink pad and putting it right over your backgrounds. But there are a ton of different things you can do with this technique. So the first way I wanted to show you this is with a plaid background, and what better way than a Christmas card. I love plaid during Christmas time. I love plaid anytime, but Christmas especially. So I went side to side or corner to corner, and then I'm going to go ahead and go about maybe 1.5 inches and do another line. Now this doesn't have to be perfect. It's a distressed look, so don't worry about being super perfect here. I did one little line up there in the top left-hand corner, and then I'll go down right underneath the line, again going about 1.5 inches and placing my tape down there on the bottom corner and just giving that a good press to transfer the ink. Now once I have all the stripes going one way, I need to go ahead and flip the stripes and go from corner to corner the opposite way. Before I do that though, I want to make sure that I get some of that extra ink off. The ink can start to build up on the back of your tape where you're not stamping all the color off, and then you get splotches, especially with your dye inks, with your pigment inks too, but especially with your dye inks like this. So go ahead and just place it down on your extra sheet of paper and get all that extra ink off of it. and then go back in and start stamping again. So here I'm doing it the opposite way, exact same technique that I did before. I'm placing that tape down into the ink pad and giving it a good press with my fingers. Then once I feel like I have it inked up, I can go ahead and bring it over to my paper, place it down once I have it where I want it, and then place my other piece of paper on top and use your brayer, use your hand, whatever you want, but give that some good pressure to get it down and transfer the ink onto the paper. So I've got my last little bit there to stamp in the bottom left-hand corner, and there is a closer look. How fun is that? So that's a fun background, but we're not quite done with it yet. We want to go ahead and add another color in to really create that plaid look. But I didn't want my tape the same width as what I used before. I don't have a lot of space to store all different types of widths of tape, so what I like to do is cut it in my paper trimmer. I just line it up with the line, stick it down, and it cuts like butter. I mean, really, it's that simple. You can do this also with a guillotine trimmer. All you need to do is place it down and slice it off. It's super simple to do. And you don't have to have all those extra widths of tape laying around just for little techniques like this. And it's great to use for different masking techniques as well. Now, this is the same exact technique. Even though the tape is just a little bit skinnier, you want to do the exact same thing. This first time that I ink up the tape, though, I really like to get everything out of the way just because it is a little bit cumbersome. You've got all that extra tape that's super sticky still. So just clear everything out of the way while you're inking up that first time. It's really going to save you a lot of headache, especially if you have something where you accidentally let the tape fall onto your paper that you're working on, and then your whole piece is ruined and you have to start over. So just clear everything out of the way the first time inking up, and then go ahead and bring in your panel and you can start stamping again. Now for this thinner strip, I'm just going to place it in between each time I stamped a red strip. So here I'm going in between the first two I stamped. Again, I'll just lay down that piece of tape, give it a good press, and lay over that extra sheet of paper so I don't smear any ink that might be on top of the tape or any extra ink that's on my fingers from pressing down that tape into the ink pad. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because it is just more of the same, but I wanted to show you the whole kind of process of making this plaid background. Now I'm just using 2 strips of tape today. However, you can go as many or as few as you want to. You could just do the red, you could add in the green, you could go for a red, a green, and a brown and just cut your brown strip a little bit thinner. Again, you can do that just with your paper trimmer and putting your tape in the paper trimmer and slicing it that way. You can get some super thin strips that way. And yes, you could do plaid backgrounds with just stamping with the line stamp. However, this is a much more distressed way of doing it, which I love the look of. You're not going to get those perfect stamps. You're going to get some pieces where it has like the little dots of maybe some lint or something you've picked up, or you've got different like little crinkles in it. So it's just a really fun look to play around with and add to your more distressed looking cards. So I will finish up with this last little stamp here, and I'm just going to press that down, and here is a look at the fun background. So this one is probably my favorite one that I made out of all 3 of them, and it's the first one I made. So super simple technique to get right on the first try. Now to finish this card, I am using the Merry Christmas stamp set from Joy Claire Stamps. It has some really great images in it that are perfect for Christmas time. I'm using this little tree and I'm stamping it right onto an oval die cut that I die cut from white cardstock with the waffle flower oval nesting die set. That is a great die set that I just picked up. It has so many different colors that are so many different sizes of dies in it, and it's super cheap. It's only like 17 bucks right now on scrapbook.com. I'll leave a link to it down below. To stamp this tree, I'm using my Misty, and I'm using a few different colors of ink. I did some selective inking. Top of the tree is green, the bottom is brown. Now, for the little moose, I'm going to go ahead and stamp him out with some VersaFine Clear ink in Fallen Leaves. I'm stamping it again with my Misty, and then I did some coloring. I did that with my Prismas and OMS, blending them out with blending stumps. I'll put the coloring over on my Instagram. This video is long enough without it. I added a little Winter Wishes sentiment over there on the right-hand side. That came from the Snowy Greeting stamp set. Just to fit the overall theme of the card. Now for my next card, I am using some more Catherine Pooler ink pads in a color combination that I've used before. I'm going to start off with some polished ink and do the exact same thing. Only for this one, I'm going to switch up the design. I'm also going to switch up my widths of tape again. So there are a lot of different ways you can customize this to kind of fit your style of card making and also the occasions, different things you want to try, maybe different patterns you want to try, a lot of different things you can do with this. Now, if you are not a messy person and you don't like ink stained fingers, something you might want to do is grab a tool like this to press your tape into your ink pad with, or you need to wear gloves for this technique. By the time I was finished with all three of these cards, my hands were an inky mess. They were dyed. It is what it is with this technique. There's not a lot of going around it. So I inked up that first piece of tape with the polished ink, and I'm going to place it onto a piece of white cardstock right there at the top. I wanted to make sure this was nice and straight, so I'm actually using my cutting mat as a ruler. Whenever you do this, if you want to do that, you're going to end up with some ink on your surface. So make sure you clean that up before you go in and do any more stamping. That's why it's so important to have that extra sheet of computer paper behind to grab all that extra ink, or you're just going to be smearing ink everywhere. Now I have my first line down, so I can go ahead and kind of line everything else up with that first line. So I don't need my ruler as a guide anymore. I'll just use the computer paper behind to grab all that extra ink. Now here is a super thin strip of tape that I cut that I'll be using some Skylight ink with. Now, color combinations are something fun to play around with this technique. I like to keep all of my ink swatched on a little ring. That way I can just kind of grab it and go and find what colors I want to use together and then go from there. Now the next strip I'm doing a little bit thicker, and I'm doing it with the Sugared Lavender ink, which is a nice like dusty purple, very gorgeous. One thing I love about the Catherine Pooler inks is they come in collections, so it's not a lot of guesswork of what inks are going to go together. You can still go outside of those collections, mix and match from within. You don't have to stay within the collections, but if you're like me and you struggle with color combinations, it's a really great jumping off point to start within those collections. So same technique here. I went ahead and did all three little stamps, and then I just repeated that same exact process right underneath. So I did the polished, I did the really thin strip of Skylight, and finally I ended with the Sugared Lavender. I did them in order so I could keep everything nice and evenly spaced. And as I'm doing this, I keep each one of those pieces of tape. I just blot off the extra on my piece of scrap paper and then just stick it to my little shelf above my work surface. And then I can keep them on hand and just switch out as needed, and I'm not wasting a ton of product that way either. To finish this card off, I am using the Dear Friend stamp set from Joy Claire Stamps. This is from the Color by Faith series, which is specifically for like Bible journaling and that faith-based stamps. I am going to use it along with a different set, which is called Life's a Breeze, and just pair it with a nice little everyday sentiment from that stamp set. So I grabbed a bunch of images from the Dear Friend stamp set, and I'm going to stamp them all at once with my Misty onto a piece of white cardstock, plain white cardstock, heavyweight. I'm stamping this with some VersaFine Clair in Fallen Leaves. I want to go for a nice brown palette here, so I stamped them with brown ink. I colored those in with my Prismacolors, blended them out with OMS, and fussy cut them. Now, as I'm blending this background, I do want to mention that Joy Claire Stamps does offer free SVG cut files for all of the stamp sets that you buy from them. You don't have to pay anything extra. It's an automatic download when you buy the stamp set. All right, back to this background. I did some quick ink blending. I used some more Catherine Pooler inks, and I used a mix of my Amazon blending brushes and clarity brushes. I did eucalyptus on the bottom, and then for the top, I'm going in with some Skylight ink, which I used on the background, so it's going to pull the whole thing together. And I'm just going from the top down for this, just so I didn't have to do any more masking, and just to add some color there at the top to separate it from the background as well. Now, once I had that blended how I wanted it, it was time to do kind of the layout and pull everything together. So I used foam tape to add all those little critters and the stump and the acorns and the leaves to the background. I matted that with some craft cardstock and put that on the background, which I put on an A2 card base. The You Got This is from that Life's a Breeze stamp set, which again is just more of an everyday sentiment to go along with my Color by Faith stamp set that I used. Now on my third and final card, I wanted to go bold and bright and really go for like a teen or a boy kind of card here. So I am using Suede Shoes, Orange Twist, and Grass Skirt from Catherine Pooler, which are all really great bright bold colors. Now I also wanted to go more distressed on this background. So I'm not going to press this into my ink pad as well as I did the first two. And I'm just kind of pouncing it up and down. You can go in on that first time and kind of pick it up with your finger. But after that, once you get that first initial layer of ink down, just do some blotting with your um, tape against your ink pad. Just kind of pounce it up and down on there. And you're not going to pick up as much ink. And it's going to give you a more distressed look. Now I'll go ahead and place this down right onto my background here. Again, this is plain white cardstock. This one is slightly thinner than an A2 size, so it's 5.5 inches from top to bottom, but across it's only about 4 inches. So I'm going to have a nice little gap on both sides. Now, when I put that down, I did not use my brayer at all on that. I just used my finger and lightly ran over it. That is going to give me that very, very distressed look, even more so than my first two cards. So this is more of a distressed look technique, but whenever you add a little bit more to it, like doing it this way, you can get even more distressed looks, which I love, and I think it's so much fun to kind of play around with how hard you're pressing and just different things like that to get different looks with such a simple technique. All right, once I had the Suede Shoes down, I went in with Orange Twist next, and I inked up my tape the exact same way just by pouncing it up and down, and used my fingers to gently press that down onto the paper for that more distressed look. And then it was time to go in with Grass Skirt. Again, just kind of getting that initial layer down with my finger and then pouncing up and down to make sure that I get that really nice distress look. It's going to take a little bit of the ink away too when you pounce it up and down and give you some bumps and ridges and just different kind of textures in there, which is fun. Again, placing that down right onto the card background, and then I'll use my paper over the top. Or I remember I actually wanted to see how using my brayer compared to just using my finger to see if it really made that much of a difference between the distressing looks. So I used my brayer on this one and pulled it up, and it does give a more solid result to use that brayer. So if you want the distressed look, just go with your fingers. Don't go in with that brayer. That's going to give you some really great coverage, as you can tell with the green. Now I finished off that complete stripe pattern on the background with a few more stripe stamps. Same colors, same color combination, same order. Super simple. Then it was time to finish off this card, and I am using the Jesus is My Jam stamp set. This is another from the Color by Faith line, which is the faith-based stamp, which is a great way to use your stamps. I love Bible journaling and I love making faith-based cards, but sometimes I want to use those stamps just in my everyday card making. So I pulled this one out. I love the images in it, and I think they're perfect for like that teen or boyish where they're at that weird age where you kind of don't know what to make them. They're not into Legos, video games you've already done, things like that. This is a great kind of overall general theme with just the music and the headphones. I love it. So I fussy cut those all out after I colored them with my colored pencils, added a happy birthday sentiment, and that finished off the cards. So there you have it, 3 different ways to use that masking tape background technique, but there are so many more color combinations and patterns and different ways you can play around with this and make it your own. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget all the information that's going to be down in the description box below. That is going to do it from me today. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!